Hi everyone, my name is Eyal and I am a solution architect at Sauce Labs. Welcome to the sessions with the short name Tips and Tricks for cross-browser and cross-device testing using Java testing frameworks. I am based in the UK and I have passions for learning new technologies and new test frameworks. This is also the reason for these sessions, that I wanted to challenge myself to learn new Java frameworks such as JUnit 5 that is quite new, and understand the complexity of using different frameworks to run tests in parallel on different platforms and browsers. This sentence, be student, not a follower, I only heard a few weeks ago, and it is very accurate for these sessions. I created these sessions from my experience, and I'm sharing my knowledge. I urge you to try it yourself. Ask questions. Why did I develop in this way? Why not try another way? I will be happy to understand from your experience and your tries if there are better ways to implement what I did here. If you are Star Wars fans, I assume you know this guy, Mandalorians, and the sentence, "This is the way," meaning that for him, there is only one way. So in automations, that's what I believe. I don't think there is one way. Always check and try new things, challenge yourself. This is something that I will be happy if you share in the chat about how you start with Java. This is you, and these are some of the available programming language in the market. Did you say, I want to develop Selenium or Appium test with Java? You took Java courses and found a good company that develops automated tests with Java, or Java chose you. You arrived at a new company or a new team that already use Java as the automated frameworks, and you start developing with Java. For me, I arrived at a company many years ago in the UK to be part of one of the Agile teams as a QA members, and the company used Java with Selenium. So I learned Java and Selenium and developed automated tests with the team. Let's start about Java testing frameworks. In these sessions, I will talk about cross-browser testing and cross-device testing and how to run in parallel. I will do that using Java with the popular frameworks TestNG, JUnit 4, and JUnit 5. There are also examples of Cucumber in the repository that I will share. Still, since Cucumber is mainly used with other frameworks such as TestNG and JUnit, I will not mention Cucumber in these sessions. And after all, we have only 30 minutes. And I run my tests using Selenium and Appium. I run the test on virtual machines and devices located on Sauce Labs platforms, since I have access to this platform. But you can use and run my example on any cloud solutions or Selenium grid for the virtual machines. Hopefully, we can have a pool now, and you can share which automated frameworks you are using this day. This is the link to my repository with the frameworks examples. As you can see, for each frameworks, I created a different folders and different models that you can use and take a look. Before diving into cross-browser or cross-device testing, and before talking about running tests in parallel, let's show some facts about the frameworks in one slide. As you can see, JUnit 5, also called JUnit Jupyter, is the new Java frameworks in town. Annotations. Annotations are all the tags that we can add on methods to explain to the framework which method is a test, for example, or which method should run before each test, or before all of the tests, or after each test. So, of course, all the frameworks support annotations. Some have more, some have less, but in general, they all support annotations to run tests or run code before or after each test, for example. Assertions, actually the goals of testing are assertions. We run a business flow such as login, and we need to verify, did we manage to log in? Is a specific element is enabled or visible or clickable? and so on. The frameworks have a different assertions, but they all support, of course, assertions. Assumptions. Personally, I don't remember using assumptions in my test, but they are available in JUnit frameworks and not in TestNG. Thread safe. Running tests in parallel, meaning running multiple threads simultaneously. When multiple threads are working on the same data and the value of our data is changing, test scenario is not thread safe, and we will get an inconsistent result. JUnit 4 and 5 are thread safe, but for TestNG to be thread safe, we need to add thread local construct when defining the Selenium, for example, or Appium driver. And this allows us to store data that will be accessible only by a specific thread. So using this will cause that TestNG will also be thread safe. Let's move on to cross-browser and cross-devices. First of all, what is cross-browser? So cross-browser testing or cross-device testing can help you to verify if your website or your native apps works as expected across various browsers, operating system, devices, and resolutions. Why? Why run on different browsers or different devices? In 2 words, digital confidence. You want confidence in your product. More than that, you want your users, your customers will be confident in your product. Your web applications must deliver a flawless user experience to your customers. Identify and fix any issue prior to release. Ensure every customer has a positive user experience with your product. And if a user has trouble with your app, it performs poorly, takes too long, or doesn't work effectively on their chosen browser or platform, you are in a heap of trouble. They are likely to go elsewhere, never to return. In my example, I am testing a web app. For every framework, I created 2 classes and 3 tests. The first test is to verify that the web app was loaded as expected by verify the website title. This is only one way of so many other ways to verify this. 2 other tests from the second class are about testing the login. One test is to test successful login and the URL is changed, or we enter the wrong username or password and we stay on the same page. Again, there are so many ways to test these scenarios and verify them. I'm showing here one way of doing that. So as I said, for the demo, we have 3 tests. And where do I need or can run this test? I can run my test on desktop browser, different browsers, versions, operating system, resolutions. I can run them on simulators and emulators and on real devices. And cross-browser and cross-device testing. I will run this test on different platforms, such as the latest versions of the latest -1 versions of Chrome on Mac, the latest versions of Firefox on Windows 10, and on Samsung device with Android 12 and iPhone 13 with version 15, for example. Parallel executions. Why running in parallel? The answer, fast feedback. Accelerate execution, reduce the execution time, and resolve the limitations of time and still assuring quality. I found that running in parallel for different companies, it means and done differently. For example, the parallel executions can be done on the platform level. The test will run sequentially on the Android device or the latest versions of Firefox, but I have 4 platforms, and therefore I run 4 tests. 4 tests will run in parallel. Another way to look at parallel execution is that all tests on all the platforms will run in parallel. In our example, I have 4 platforms, 3 tests, so 12 tests will run in parallel. Or customize the parallelizations. Devices are expensive resources. So I will run all my tests on the same device. But for VM, such as a desktop or simulators and emulator, I can create more VMs and run my tests in parallel. So in this way, 8 tests will run in parallel. Let's start with JUnit 4. In my example, I'm using Maven as the build automation tools. There are other tools such as Gradle. For the Maven website, I selected JUnit 4 latest versions and copy it to my POM file. I defined 4 parameters and created 2 dimensions array with the platform I want to run on my test. And when I run the test, each parameter will get the values from the 2 dimensions array. So for example, when I run my code with the first line in the array that I showed in the previous slide, I will set the capability of browser name with Chrome, browser versions with latest -1, and platform name with Mac 11. The reason I added the platform parameter, that in this case it's the desktop, it's because I want to run my web app test on desktop VMs, and for that I'm using Selenium. But I also want to run my test on Android and iPhone devices, so I'm using Appium. Selenium and Appium capabilities are different, so I need to add these differentiations between the platform, so I can create a different capabilities for Selenium and for Appium. Defining the parallel execution is done in the POM file by adding the Maven Sapphire plugin with the configuration as it is here. Running the test, I make sure I am on the right path for the test in JUnit 4. We can see the parameters that I define and the array with all the platforms, and how I create the driver. And in the profile, I defined the running in parallel. To run all the tests, I'm using the commands Maven clean test, and all my tests will start to run. I will switch to SourceType platform and see that tests run on the desktop browser and are still running on the read devices. I can check the result of one of the tests that we run. This is the success login test. We can also check the executions of one of the read devices. This is the fade login. And we can see that all tests run and pass. Moving on to JUnit 5. From the Maven website, I selected JUnit 5 latest versions and copied it to my POM file. Please note that JUnit 5 is called JUnit Jupyter. In JUnit 5, there are many new options to use parameters in methods. But the challenge for me was that this is per method, and I was looking for something global, but couldn't find it. So I selected to use CSV file and added the parameter to all the tests, because test is a method. The CSV file format is as you want to handle it later. I created the CSV file that includes the capability name and the capability value separated by slashes. Before each method will run before each test, I found out that the test info parameters includes the CSV file parameters that we defined for each method. Each time test info will include a row from the CSV file, and a row is a platform we want to run. I developed a method to handle the data from the CSV file and set them in a map structure where the key is the capability name and the value is the capability value. As you remember, I have the info about capability name and value from how I built the CSV file. Defining the parallel execution is done in the POM file by adding the Maven, as before, by adding the Maven self-file plugin with the configuration as it is here. There are many options to run parallel using JUnit 5, and more info can be found in the JUnit documentations, JUnit 5 documentations. Running the test, I make sure I am in the right path, this time on JUnit 5. You can see that the CSV file, okay, with all the platforms that I want to run, and I will use and I use this CSV file for all my methods. For all my methods, I added to use this CSV file. Before each before each test, get a row from the CSV file, and I ended this row, get the capability names and values to create a driver. To run all the tests, I'm using the commands Maven clean test. I will switch to SourceTar platform and see that tests run on the desktop browsers and are still running on the read devices. I can check the result of one of the tests that we run. This is the success login test. And we can see that all tests run and passed. Moving to TestNG. From the Maven website, I selected TestNG latest versions and copy it to my POM file. We can use the TestNG framework without an XML file, but I think that TestNG XML file gives a lot of options for controlling and running on different platforms and using parallel executions. So I'm using the TestNG XML file. Here we can see how to define the path to the XML file in the POM file. In the XML file, each test section is a platform that we want to run with the name of the capabilities and the values. I can customize and define how to run the test in parallel. For example, for running on a desktop, I also define parallel in these sections, meaning that all the 3 tests will run on 3 Windows 10 and Firefox browser in parallels. But I didn't define the parallel methods for the real devices. So the test will run sequentially on each device. It is easy to read the parameters from the XML file to the test and set the capability according to the values. Running the test, I make sure I am on the right path. You can see the XML file. That contains all the platforms and how I define what to run in parallel in the. Yeah, this is the capability name and value. In the POM file, I define how to find this XML file. And we can see the 3 tests that we want to run. Before methods that runs before each test, we get the capabilities from the XML file and create the driver. To run all the tests, I'm using the command Maven clean test. I will switch to the Source Labs platform. Now I can see that 2 executions on real device because I want to use the same Android device and iOS device to run my test. And the VMs, everything is run in parallel. I can check the result of one of the tests that we run. And we can see that all tests run and passed. Conclusions. This is my conclusions. Maybe I missed something here. I will be happy to hear from your thought about the frameworks. Cross-browser. I think that JUnit 4 and TestNG with XML file are pretty good for supporting cross-platform. JUnit 5, this is a new framework for me. There are many new ways to use parameters and the source of argument, but it is per method. I couldn't find a built-in option to define parameters and efficiently use them in the before each method, for example. Parallel execution, JUnit 5 has new method options to run in parallel if I compare it to the previous JUnit versions. And TestNG, it is easy to customize the parallel executions from the XML file. So thank you, and that's time for a question.